Chapter 149, They've Got It Takes Two. We've got sword fights. There were plenty of lone wolf players like Ben. A lot of players were curious about It Takes Two, but held back because of the two-player requirement. But soon they realized something, whether on streaming platforms, video sites, or player communities. This game was nothing like last year's Overcooked from Lucas. First of all, the amount of content. With its cartoon art style and two-player co-op setup, most people would assume it's an indie game or a small-budget title. But It Takes Two is nothing like that. The size and content of this game could match some big releases. The key point is this: everything in the trailers Lucas showed earlier wasn't just fluff, it's all actually in the game. Different stages come with different abilities, and the cinematic camera work throughout makes it feel like you're watching a game movie. And unlike Overcooked, where everyone starts happy, then gets frustrated and ends up fighting, turning chaos into breakups, It Takes Two so far has been nothing but heartwarming. That's because of the content design. Overcooked was purely about teamwork and coordination. If you failed to work together, blame was inevitable. If you couldn't control your temper, it easily turned into arguments. But It Takes Two is completely different. This game combines puzzles and platforming. If both players are clumsy, it doesn't matter, you just laugh and keep playing together. If one player is skilled and the other is struggling, the split-screen view makes it easy to see where the problem is. Instead of Overcooked, where everyone insists they're right and it's the other person's fault. Once you see the problem, you can patiently help, which actually deepens your bond, friendship, and connection. Plus, the game's story and level design really help shift emotions and keep things light. Even the Book of Love in the game keeps stirring things up, which in a way takes all the blame away from players and makes it fun. With a shared goal, arguments almost never happen, it's all about working together. After launch, especially on streaming platforms, many streamers jumped on It Takes Two because there were no big games at the time. The funny interactions made for great content, and a lot of players who weren't planning to buy it just couldn't resist anymore. As for lone wolf players, how do they find a partner? Naturally, they started searching on gaming forums and communities. Before long, the forums were full of posts like these. Looking for someone to play It Takes Two with, must have a good temper and be online often. Looking for a teammate, any gender is fine, must be patient and online for long sessions. I'll buy the game, you just join. I'll buy the game, you bring yourself. Let's play It Takes Two this weekend, DM me if interested. A lot of players couldn't experience the game before simply because they had no one to play with. But under the lure of the game, they started looking for someone to play with. That's when many players realized they weren't the only ones playing alone. There were plenty of others in the same boat, people who could only play solo for one reason or another. In that moment, many who had felt lonely before started thinking maybe they weren't so alone after all. If there was anything that felt a bit off to them, it was this. In the community forums, many players who raved about It Takes Two were pairs of one man and one woman. Either married couples or boyfriend and girlfriend. But looking at these players searching for partners, they were all guys. While other people played It Takes Two as couples, their version turned into bro squad co-op, dueling side by side. But whether it was It Takes Two or bro squad co-op, there was one thing in common. After playing, everyone was amazed by the level design. Especially as the story slowly progressed, the game's content turned out to be impressively rich. Besides the variety of minigames, the game also showed its creativity in other ways. Each theme had its own special items. For example, after moving from the big tree stage to the bedroom, May and Cody got caught by a space gorilla and ended up in outer space. There they each got a new item. May got shoes that ignored gravity, and Cody got a belt that could make him grow bigger. With these two brand new items, the space stage gave players a magical and dreamlike experience, almost like time travel. But from here, the game's story also reached a major point of conflict. In the game, Cody and May had turned from humans into dolls, which was naturally hard to accept. At first, they wanted to ask their daughter how to turn back. But they discovered she couldn't see or hear them at all. Cody believed they had been put under a spell, and that it was their daughter Rose's tears that turned them into dolls. So if they could make Rose cry again, maybe they could turn back into humans. That was also why the space monkey tried to stop them. The line that stuck with players was the space monkey saying, "You'll only make her cry." To make his point, the space monkey even pulled out a tape recorder. And to make Rose cry, Cody and May agreed to go to her toy castle. To destroy her favorite toy so she would be sad enough to cry. "These parents are too much," Hannah said, after coming back from Hot Pot and continuing her playthrough of It Takes Two. Destroying their daughter's favorite toy to make her cry, combined with the space monkey's earlier line, felt extremely ironic. "But from a story point of view, it kind of makes sense," Zach said, scratching his head. "They turned into dolls, and when they try to talk to her, she doesn't respond at all." "That's true," Hannah said after thinking for a moment, then nodded. "But more importantly, it's about communication. It reminds me of when I was a kid, my whole card collection got sold as scrap by my mom, and I cried for a long time," Zach sighed. "That's rough. I had a happy childhood, and my parents never threw away my toys," Hannah said with a smug smile. "That's the importance of communication and understanding," Zach replied. "Totally agree," Hannah nodded. "So you'd better never throw away my figures and models," Zach grinned. "Hannah, so that's what you were getting at?" "Oh please, when have I ever thrown away your figures? I even bought you that glass display cabinet," Hannah said, rolling her eyes. Hee, come on, let's see how to beat this part. Back to the story," Zach laughed, quickly changing the subject. End of the chapter. Zach and Hannah kept laughing and joking as they continued their game. They had to admit, Rose's room was the most interesting stage so far. The earlier space journey was already something else. But this hopscotch stage, with all kinds of fun minigames, kept amazing them non-stop. After reaching the train station, the Book of Love, Dr. Hakim, appeared again and pulled them into a kaleidoscope. Every stage was fun to explore, and all of them were connected to toys. The puzzles in these stages were also really creative. For example, after making it to the train station, they had to find 4 matching dolls to unlock a new stage, Dinosaur Land. There, their cart crashed into a sleeping dinosaur, so they had to find a way to wake it up and make it open its mouth to continue. One player controlled a big dinosaur to bite a handle, while the other rode a little red dino forward. After that, they had to use different dinosaur toys in the park to get past the mechanisms. This was probably the most complex puzzle Hannah and Zach had faced so far. But right after that came an exciting naval battle. The final boss fight in that part was against the giant octopus from the trailer. It was thrilling and intense. After beating the octopus, the game switched to a circus act. One person rode a bike while the other balanced on a beam. The teamwork here was much more than just flipping switches like in the beginning. It was tighter, faster, and more in sync. Leaving the circus, there weren't any puzzles for a while, just pure cooperation to make it to the castle. That gave Hannah and Zach a short breather. When they arrived at the castle, the guards spotted them. Cody and May tried to lie their way through, but Dr. Hakim suddenly appeared, accusing them of trying to assassinate the queen. The guards threw Cody and May into the dungeon. Here, Cody and May worked together to escape, gaining new powers in the process. Cody got ice magic, while May got fire magic, and the camera switched to a top-down view. The game suddenly turned from action-adventure into an RPG dungeon run. Cody could teleport through bars and freeze lava, while May could dash long distances. Like most RPGs, this stage had you fight regular enemies, then elite ones, and finally the chessboard king and queen. The battles were simple, standard RPG combat. But Hannah and Zach were having a blast. Mostly because they never expected this game to include so many different playstyles. Gunfights, naval battles, racing, fighting, and now even RPG combat. Along with the huge variety of minigames, the only way to sum it up was amazing. But after the excitement, the next part of the story made Zach and Hannah feel a bit uneasy. After escaping the castle, Cody and May met the Elephant Queen, Cutie. "I'm Rose's best friend, do you want some cookies?" Cutie looked at Cody and May, forgiving them and even kindly inviting them to eat cookies. She also sensed they seemed troubled and went to give them a hug. But what she didn't expect was that Cody and May's goal was to break her. "Oh my gosh, why are you trying to hurt me? I'm just Cutie, a lovable little elephant. I love Rose and Rose loves me. I don't want to be broken." Crying, Cutie tried to escape in a rocket, but they knocked it down with a rock. Believing that making their daughter cry would turn them human again, Cody and May destroyed her as she screamed. Compared to the original version, Lucas toned down some of the cruel parts here, mainly because this scene was considered essential. After all, the theme of this chapter was, what adults see as just a toy they can throw away at any time, to a child can be their best friend. But in Lucas's view, in their previous life, the way this part was done just to create that double layer of irony, even making the player personally play the executioner, was a bit too much for the game itself. So for this section, Lucas changed everything. Even so, many players who reached this point still felt a bit uncomfortable. In the game, they find the little cutie falling from the cupboard and getting damaged. At last, their daughter Rose couldn't hold back and started crying sadly. But at this moment, Cody and May instead happily ran up to their daughter, and even danced in the middle of her tears. What shocked them, however, was that they didn't turn back into humans as they had expected. They were still dolls. But by the bed, they found a letter that seemed to tell them how to turn back. Just then, Dr. Hakim, who had been stirring up trouble all along, appeared again and tore the letter to pieces. At that moment, Zack and Hannah couldn't help but cheer for his move. All along, Dr. Hakim had clearly played the role of a guide in the game. But because of all the times he ruined Cody and May's plans and kept fueling conflicts, Zack and Hannah had never liked him much. But now, this scene actually made the two of them feel very satisfied. After all, the earlier scene had been rather heavy. Before this, the game had always given players a feeling of fun and joy. Cody and May kept messing with each other along the way, pulling little pranks. And with the over-the-top antics of Dr. Hakim, the whole game had felt like a cheerful comedy. So much so that many players unconsciously ignored the relationship between May and Cody. But the Elephant Queen Cutie scene pulled players right back to it. Even though the visuals were still very cartoonish, without a single drop of blood, many players still found it hard to bear. One big reason was that the previous bosses they defeated, the vacuum cleaner, the toolbox, had all shown a clear desire to attack. But Princess Elephant never fought back. She was very friendly, and only her subordinates had blocked Cody and May. As for the beetle mount in the tree's heart, which Cody and May had promised to give Honey, many players forgot all about it. It really didn't leave much of an impression. End of the chapter. Before playing It Takes Two, neither Zack nor Hannah had ever imagined such a large-scale co-op game. After playing for an entire day, it felt like they had only experienced about half of it. And even in the later parts of the story, It Takes Two still kept up its earlier brilliance. The cutie scene, while reducing some of the earlier joy, added a bit of weight to the journey. But soon, the two were drawn in again by even cooler levels and powers. In the cuckoo clock scene, May and Cody once again got two strange abilities. Cody could control time, restoring destroyed things. May could create a double of herself. Just like the earlier levels, every spot required them to use their unique powers. This scene also had plenty of stunning moments, like soaring through the sky on the back of a bird, which left a deep impression on both of them. But during this part of the journey, Zack and Hannah also noticed something different. Cody and May were working together more smoothly and becoming a bit closer. Especially at the end of the level when the clock exploded, Cody used time reversal to help May escape, perfectly showing their teamwork. That parkour section felt just like a sci-fi blockbuster, tense and exciting. The moment they crashed into each other, and later when Rose happily looked at the fixed cuckoo clock, helped Zack and Hannah shake off some of the gloom from the cutie scene and made them even more curious about what would happen next. After the cuckoo clock, it was back to the loud and dramatic love expert, Dr. Hakim. Under his lead, Cody and May arrived at the next stage, Snow Globe. In this level, the tool they had was a magnet split into two halves. They had to use the idea of like poles repelling and opposite poles attracting to get past the challenge. But this time, things were different. After the dangerous adventure in the cuckoo clock, Cody and May's relationship seemed to have eased a little. Inside the snow globe, they even started to look back on the past. In front of a tree with a saw stuck in it, old memories came flooding back. "Oh look, a saw. Hey, remember our first Christmas with Rose? You mean the year when all the Christmas trees were sold out?" "Yeah, and we snuck into the woods to cut down a tree. I was sure we were going to get caught." During their journey, the two of them chatted about the old days. Along the way, they came across a dead, silent little town, frozen under layers of snow and ice. Dr. Hakim told them they needed to ring the bell to bring the town back to life. The game didn't say it outright, but Zach and Hannah, who were playing, understood the meaning behind it. It was clear that this was a metaphor for Cody and May's frozen hearts. During this part of the game, May and Cody talked about their past. "This is where we got engaged. I was so nervous back then." "I know, that's what made it so special." "Really? You forgot the entire speech you prepared. That had to be the worst proposal in history." "No, I didn't care what you said. I cared about how you acted. You didn't try to hide your fear. That was brave." Just like the frozen, lifeless town was brought back by the sound of the bell, their feelings seemed to be slowly mending too. The town, the clock tower, the underwater candy factory, each place had its own charm and clever puzzles. Eventually, the two of them found themselves reminiscing about everything they'd been through. "Finally, we can take a break." "Yeah, we earned it." "Definitely. Totally. You know, since Rose was born, we've never taken a vacation." "It's been that long." "Yeah, why didn't we ever go skiing together?" "Well, back then, Rose was just born, and the family's expenses went up." The two chatted while riding the cable car, and in this stage, the players could really feel the warmth between them. When the cable car reached the bottom, Cody and May started racing each other down an icy slope. Two back-to-back thrilling ski runs gave Zach and Hannah a real rush. Then Dr. Hakim showed up again, and this time, the magnets they carried could actually attract each other. This was no longer a hint, it was almost spelled out. In front of the screen, Zach and Hannah thought back to all the earlier themed areas, realizing that none of them had been pointless. The shed and the tree had simply introduced the story and helped players learn the game's mechanics. The angry vacuum cleaner and the squirrel and bee battles subtly showed the struggles of married life. Once they reached Rose's room, the game truly entered its most dramatic stage. The couple mistakenly believed that Rose's tears were what turned them into dolls. While trying to destroy her toys to make her cry again, a space toy monkey appeared to stop them. Parents trying to make their child sad, while a toy tried to protect her, this sharp, almost cutting bit of storytelling dove deep into the parent-child relationship. And later, when they broke the elephant toy, it pushed the game's conflict to its peak. They had never truly cared about their child's feelings. But from that moment on, the game's tone began to shift. The cuckoo clock stands for time. Faced with the chores and daily grind of life, will they give each other enough time together? The snow globe stands for attraction. What was it that brought them together in the first place? After clearing the snow globe stage, the two of them stand there talking about the past, clearly showing they care about each other again. Outside the snow globe, their daughter Rose sees it glowing again, and some of the gloom in her heart lifts. By this point, Zach and Hannah also realize the game is probably close to the end. And that's exactly the case. Next comes the garden, filled with new tools and very fun levels. There are also more fun mini-games to play here. But aside from the enjoyable teamwork, Zach and Hannah are now also drawn in by the story. The purple mist, withered branches, and broken ruins in the garden all show that it's an abandoned, forgotten place. This used to be the place Cody cared about most. After beating the boss, the purple mist fades, green plants sprout again, and tiny yellow lights float in the air, bringing the garden back to life. The once withered Joey comes back to life, symbolizing Cody's passion returning. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how important this was to you back then, Cody. Now, I understand," May says as she looks at Joey in bloom again. But Joey instead comforts May. "Cody, giving up gardening wasn't your fault. Cody, no one can take away your dream except you. Are you going to give it up again?" From this talk with Joey, Cody realizes that no one can take away his dream. It all depends on his own choice. Love is what drives people to discipline themselves, and with love, they'll take the initiative to solve problems. In the final scene, Dr. Hakim leads Cody and May up to the attic. The last theme is music, which was once May's dream. Drums and singing become Cody and May's special abilities for this stage. Working together and with Dr. Hakim's help, they find the speakers, microphone and lights, defeat the flying monster and rescue the orchestra. Most of the concert preparations are done, now they just need a rehearsal and an audience. By heading to the disco, Cody and May find the audience for their concert, a crowd of glow sticks. After all that, a one-of-a-kind concert begins with countless glow sticks watching. From backstage, May slowly walks onto the stage. She overcomes her worries, stands on stage, and sings her heart out. With May's music, the fireworks, and the cheers from the glow sticks, Cody and May float above the stage, holding each other close in a deep kiss. This moment shows their once-broken relationship finally coming together again. This time, in their doll forms, they finally find the real way to turn back. May wakes up on the sofa, and Cody wakes up on the table. As Cody and May found their love again through all their trials, their daughter Rose was also trying to save her parents' love. In her young mind, she thought their fights were because of her, so she decided to leave so they could be friends again. Of course, in the end, Cody and May find Rose. At the train station, the three of them walk home hand in hand. The game ends here, but the ending credits give players a nice surprise. The fixed vacuum cleaner, the tidy toolbox, the space monkey put back in place, the cleaned-up garden with flowers in bloom, the repaired cutie, the cuckoo clock on the wall, the snow globe on the table, the record player playing music, and the book of love sitting alone on the shelf, all bring a smile. Seeing all this, Zach and Hannah both smile. "This is probably the most fun co-op game I've ever played," Zach says with feeling. Hannah nods, take away the word probably. End of the chapter. As a co-op game, It Takes Two is pretty big in size. But if you don't count replaying the mini-games, the whole playthrough is about 12 hours. As the first batch of players finish the game, the content sparks a lot of discussion. To be honest, this is probably the most fun game of the year so far. Agreed, and I think it's not just the best game this year, it's one of the most fun games in recent years. And if we're talking co-op, I'd put it right at number 1. +1, this game is insanely cool. Every level has a different theme and special tools, it's just amazing. Yeah, it's like watching an animated movie. The best part is the huge variety of gameplay. From the first level to the last, the tools and level designs are just top-notch. Haha, totally, playing this with my girlfriend was so much fun. Lucas really wasn't lying this time. True, the Warrior of Love has finally made a game that warms your heart. Yeah, and by the time you get to the end of the story, it really hits you emotionally. Totally, especially at the ending, when they showed all the items you'd seen before, it was amazing. But the part where they destroy Cutie the elephant, that was really hard to watch. Yeah, that part almost made my girlfriend quit the game. Damn, you actually played this with your girlfriend. By the way, did no one remember the stag beetle in the big tree? What happened to the nectar? Why did they blow up the beehive instead? LOL, I totally forgot until you mentioned it. The poor stag beetle. Haha, the forgotten stag beetle. When you put it like that, it's actually kind of tragic. Stag beetle, haha, maybe I'm not human, but you guys are real dogs, just using me as a tool. On all the related forums and communities, many people who played It Takes Two were completely impressed by it. When it came to gameplay, almost every player gave it glowing reviews. On the Nebula Games platform, It Takes Two had a player score of 9.8. And for the small number of bad reviews, most were either jokes or focused on one controversial part of the story. That was the part where Cody and May thought their daughter Rose's tears were the cure. So they decided to destroy Cutie. Many players said this part of the story was too upsetting. After all, Princess Cutie, the elephant, was completely harmless in the game. She was innocent and adorable, yet still got torn apart by May and Cody. It was hard for people to accept. Many players sided with Rose and the toys, feeling that Cody and May were being awful parents. Just like Moon Baboon, the toys wanted to keep Rose happy, but her parents, Cody and May, were trying to make her cry. Still, some players said they could understand Cody and May. From the story and character point of view, May and Cody had suddenly turned into a wooden doll and a clay figure. How could they stay calm? Once they thought they'd found the solution, of course they would go for it. And it's not like they really wanted to hurt Rose, they just wanted her to cry. In real life, what parent hasn't made their kid cry at some point? Saying Cody and May didn't love their daughter just because of this doesn't make sense. The game's dialogue even showed that May, though busy working overtime, still remembered her daughter's dentist appointment. And Cody, even though he was a stay-at-home dad and forgot to take Rose to the dentist at the start, still cared for her deeply. He even built her a Lego castle in the game. If there was something Cody and May truly got wrong, it was their "I know best" attitude, whether toward each other or toward their child. That was their biggest flaw. Of course, this was just one of the debates among players who focused on the story. Another group of players cared about something else entirely. Hey, did no one pay attention to Rose? If you think about it from another angle, this happy game could instantly turn into a horror game. Haha, now that you say it, you're right. Parents mysteriously fall into a deep sleep. Strange things keep happening at home. What's the real reason? Tune in tonight for our science mystery program. Rose is home minding her own business. Then the vacuum blows up, the toolbox breaks, her favorite toy cutie falls from the sky, the cuckoo clock repairs itself, dead flowers in the garden suddenly bloom again, creepy sounds come from the attic gramophone. Holy crap, the more you think about it, the scarier it gets. Stop it, this was such a happy game, but now you've given me goosebumps. And besides the content in the game itself, the experience outside of it also got a lot of funny complaints. The theme was fixing a married couple's relationship, the characters were a husband and wife, and the gameplay was two-player co-op. Plus, it was announced on Valentine's Day, so of course people labeled it a couple's game. The problem is, not everyone has a partner. Some players didn't even have a female friend to play with, many were just lone wolves playing solo. And since It Takes Two is also an adventure game, besides coordination, some stages also require a bit of skill. So the online chatter started to shift. At first, everyone was praising the level design, the artistic style, and how well the story was integrated. But after 2 or 3 days, as more people finished the game, all kinds of strange complaints started to appear. And many players agreed with those comments. Game forums and review sections were full of posts like these. This game is such a great deal. At $20, it's as good as an AAA title. My only regret is that I don't have a girlfriend to play with. This is a masterpiece, but I thought my wife was too bad at the game, so I ditched her and played with my buddy for 2 days. Brothers, did I do the right thing? The game is great, but the title is misleading. Other people played It Takes Two, but I played Two Bros together. Help, I played this game with a close friend from my dorm, and now the way he looks at me feels a bit off. And every time he showers, he insists I join him. End of the chapter. There were all kinds of comments, some about the level design, some about the story, and some were just memes or jokes based on real-life experiences. But one thing is clear, It Takes Two gave every player an unforgettable experience. Even if there were moments that made some players upset or sad, the journey itself was exciting and full of surprises, just like an animated movie. The ending was a happy one, as expected, which left many players very satisfied. On the 4th day after launch, reviews from major media outlets started coming out. A lot of game reviewers even admitted they were moved to tears. After all, with so few exciting releases lately, there hasn't been much real news that catches players' attention. And many game journalists still remember how awkward it was when they reviewed Dark Souls back then. That's because Nebula Games never provided special review copies to the media for early access. They had to play the game at the same time as everyone else, and then write the reviews. But for game media, playing isn't the same as for regular players. Players can just enjoy the game, but the media have to pay attention to all the details and fully understand the content for their review. That's a lot of work. When Dark Souls came out, it was like the darkest time for domestic game media. The insane difficulty, the fragmented storytelling, and the side quests that you would almost always miss on your first playthrough without a guide. Because of that, even 2 weeks after Dark Souls launched in China, some big media outlets still hadn't published their reviews. And by the time they finally beat the game and understood all the depth, the situation got even more awkward, because by then, the game's reputation had already shifted from mixed reviews to overwhelmingly positive. For players, they already understood what kind of game Dark Souls was. Reviews mainly serve players who don't know much about the game, giving them some reference. But once players are clear about it, reviews don't matter as much anymore. Aside from hardcore fans, or people who want to bash a game using review scores, most casual players only look at ratings to decide whether to buy a game or not. So Dark Souls left a deep impression on game media back then. But now it's different. This time, even though the media didn't get an early review copy for It Takes Two either. The reviews weren't published on launch day. But at least they came out while the game was still at peak popularity, and because of the co-op requirement, a lot of players had been on the fence before buying. So these reviews came at just the right time. They really nailed the hype this time. Among domestic media, the lowest score was 9 out of 10. GameSpace, which had interviewed Lucas before, even gave it a perfect 10. Here's what GameSpace said in their review. Without a doubt, It Takes Two is the best co-op game in recent years, no question about it. From the moment you dive into this magical world, you're constantly bombarded with incredible sights and sounds, enjoying a feast of creativity and imagination. For over 10 hours, the game keeps switching up its gameplay and settings. One moment you're racing along train tracks among the stars, the next you're sailing a battleship through a world of building blocks, blasting away at a giant octopus as big as a mountain. You never know what's waiting around the next corner. And mechanics that could easily carry an entire game elsewhere are sometimes just a small appetizer here, never to show up again in the journey ahead. That constant sense of surprise, combined with dreamlike scenes, makes the whole experience feel like a thrilling roller coaster ride. This is an amazing co-op adventure that sets a new standard for creative game design. It's stunning, fast-paced, packed with ideas, and every step pays off with fun and originality. And when it comes to the story, It Takes Two also shines. It perfectly blends gameplay with narrative. The story explores timeless questions about love, marriage, and family. When marriage is worn down by daily life, can warmth bring love back? Besides love, what else keeps two people together? If passion fades, what makes life worth living? In the game, these questions are explored through 3 themes. When life gets busy, will couples still make time for each other? What keeps them together beyond love? And if life kills our passion, what meaning does it still hold? Through the levels and story in the game, players also got answers to those 3 questions, and in the end, the game's theme was brought to a higher level. In a family, a child is like a rope that ties the couple together. Of course, a child is never a shackle for the parents, but at least they should be the last safety line. It's a little cruel, but very real. This heavy and realistic theme was wrapped in a clever setting, using the adventure of tiny fantasy characters to look at the world from a different angle. As major media reviews came out, the hype for It Takes Two didn't cool down at all. Sales also kept climbing, reaching 1.55 million copies in just 2 weeks. This number even surprised Lucas a little. After all, a 2-player game, especially one that forces co-op, is very picky about its players. Not all players have a partner to play with, and on top of that, It Takes Two uses an invite system. One player owns the game and can invite another to join. But even so, the game still sold this much, which was way beyond Lucas' expectations. Lucas went over the launch situation of It Takes Two and came up with a rough summary. The sales boom mainly came from 3 factors. The first factor is the solid quality of the game itself. The second factor is the lack of this type of game. For many players, co-op games are nothing new, but a co-op game as rich and big as It Takes Two was the very first of its kind. The third factor is the game drought. After the new year, companies did release some titles, but none of them were strong hits. Games that players were really waiting for were still in the coming soon stage. In this situation, the appearance of It Takes Two naturally attracted players hungry for new games. End of the chapter, with top ratings from both the media and players, and with hot discussion threads in every gaming community and forum, the hype around It Takes Two kept rising. It wasn't just players paying attention. Many designers in the gaming industry were also watching It Takes Two and studying what made it successful. Although It Takes Two is packed with content, the main story alone takes over 10 hours, spanning from the first level in the shed to the final level with the gramophone. At its core, it's still a mid-sized game. For some indie developers, It Takes Two is clearly too big for them to handle. But for second and third tier studios, its size is something they could afford. Compared to the big first and second tier companies, which usually focus on FPS or ARPG titles, these smaller studios often choose niche genres and themes. It Takes Two is obviously a great example. Co-op games were already rare in the market, and the success of It Takes Two also sparked player enthusiasm for this genre. This naturally created a market. So where does the success of It Takes Two really come from? Can its success be copied? Can it be used as a reference? These became the key questions for many studios and designers. Its level design, balance, guidance, art style, music, and even the small details. All of these were repeatedly analyzed, making It Takes Two the new standard for co-op games. But for Lucas, It Takes Two had basically reached its end. And this game is different from previous titles like Fall Guys or Overcooked. It's not suitable for a workshop system. The game is simply too complex. The art style of each themed scene, the level designs, and the special mechanics are all tightly tied to the story and theme. If any part is changed, it would break the whole experience. So even though It Takes Two is a level-based game, it's not fit for a creative workshop. And for Lucas, the game's achievements so far were enough to satisfy him. After all, the original goal of making this game was to let players feel the joy it brings. Looking at it now, that goal was perfectly achieved. In Nebula Games' office, Lucas leaned back in his massage chair, holding his phone and browsing his official page and community forums. Under his posts were messages from players who had played It Takes Two. Most of them were similar, basically full of praise. What really made Lucas happy was that players finally saw him in a new light again. One sentence summed it up: the warrior of love lives up to the name. While Lucas was scrolling through his phone, there was a knock on the office door. After he responded, Lisa came in and said, "Lucas, the reporter from GameSpace is here." "Okay, I'll be right there," Lucas nodded. After It Takes Two became a huge hit, GameSpace reached out to Nebula Games to arrange a special interview with Lucas about the game. After all, the main buzz lately has been centered around It Takes Two, and GameSpace wanted to publish a feature. Nebula Games and GameSpace had already worked closely together last year. Lucas had also done interviews with them before, and the reports were fine, so he agreed to this one as well. He walked into the lounge. The three GameSpace staff sitting on the couch stood up. Lucas vaguely remembered the reporter in the middle. "Last year, when GameSpace interviewed me, was it also you?" Lucas said, looking at the name William on the reporter's badge. "That's right, Lucas, good memory." William smiled, but in his head, he remembered last year's interview. Back then, he was too inexperienced. The whole thing turned into him just taking notes and being completely led around. This year, he wasn't going to make the same mistake. Looking at Lucas with a smile, William thought to himself. Determined not to mess up this time, he took the lead. "Lucas, thank you for taking the time for us. Shall we start now?" "No problem, let's get straight to it. Lisa, bring those Cokes over." Lucas nodded and sat down, then turned to Lisa. Lisa responded and got a few bottles of Coke from the fridge, handing them out. "Thanks," William said instinctively as he took an ice-cold Coke from Lisa. Then he paused for a second. This felt oddly familiar. But this time William had learned his lesson. As the interviewer, he quickly started. "Lucas, last year your game Dark Souls had a huge impact worldwide and even won Best Role-Playing Game of the Year. At the same time, its story sparked heated discussions online. Many players thought your next game would be a sequel to Dark Souls, continuing its story. But this year, you released something completely different with It Takes Two. Why is that?" Lucas smiled and nodded. Mainly, I wanted to give something special to the players. After Dark Souls launched, I noticed a lot of players misunderstood me, thinking I enjoy making them suffer. Especially after the Game of the Year awards, many misread my thank you speech. Honestly, that hurt a little. I've always tried to see things from the player's perspective. Whether it's ARPGs, RPGs, action-adventure, or casual simulation, I'm not the kind of designer who sticks to one genre. I enjoy challenging myself with different types of games. But there's one thing that never changes, and that's why I make games. Every game carries my love for players. I've always wanted to create games that warm people's hearts. Dark Souls is known for being hard, but if you really study it, you'll see it's not so hard that most people can't beat it. Once you understand its level design, bosses, and combat system, the game becomes much easier. The key is whether players can figure out the tricks. If they don't, it feels hard. But once they do, most people can finish the game smoothly. It's just like It Takes Two. Once players work together and solve the puzzles, everything flows naturally. Dark Souls works the same way. The difference is Dark Souls hides this, while in It Takes Two I made it clear. William nodded while listening, but something felt off. He just couldn't put his finger on it. Because everything Lucas said was true. Lucas, can I ask something players really care about? Will there be a sequel to Dark Souls? William decided to steer the topic away. He didn't want to fall into Lucas's rhythm again. Of course, it's already in our development plans. The sequel to Dark Souls will tell a prequel story, but it'll take some time before players can see it. Still, they can look forward to the gameplay reveal in May. Lucas smiled. Compared to last year, they didn't even have a folder created yet. But hey, hyping the game early isn't called lying, it's called building anticipation. William didn't know that. In his head, he was already imagining the prequel demo at the showcase a month later. He asked excitedly, Lucas, how hard will the prequel be? Lucas smiled. Like I said before, I always want to bring joy to players, something that warms their hearts. I don't think about whether a game is hard or not, but whether it makes sense. As for what I can share, it'll be a brand new and crazy adventure. Players will find even bigger surprises than before, and I believe the art and gameplay will surpass the original. Sitting on the couch, Lucas and William talked about a lot, not just Dark Souls but other things players cared about too. Like how Nebula Games' other titles were doing overseas. For William, this interview was pure gold. Especially the news about a Dark Souls prequel. That made him thrilled. He was a die-hard fan himself. With many Nebula employees watching, William walked out of the building with a bright smile. The next day, GameSpace's homepage featured a bold, red headline, Lucas's True Vision. End of the chapter. Compared to when it first launched, It Takes Two has cooled down a bit. After all, the game doesn't have much replay value. Unlike Dark Souls, which has many strategies, the core of It Takes Two lies in its clever level design. Once players have experienced the levels and item combinations, the only new fun comes from playing with a different partner. The game itself no longer feels fresh to those who have finished it. Plus, during this time, many other game companies have announced their future plans. Some local publishers even brought in great overseas titles from last year. All of this pulled a lot of players' attention away. Even so, after GameSpace published the interview, it still drew plenty of attention. The article had some edits, but the main points were clear. Especially that part where Lucas spoke directly to the players, using his original words. Every game carries my love for the players, and I've always been committed to creating games that warm people's hearts. This interview was also translated into English and shared on overseas platforms. During this time, Target Software also started releasing some of Nebula Games' earlier small titles overseas. So anything related to Nebula Games, Target Software was actively promoting. Plus, the influence of Dark Souls overseas hadn't completely faded yet. Because of that, Lucas's interview caught a lot of attention from players abroad. When they saw his words, many overseas players gave a big thumbs up and started discussing it on forums and communities. I have to say, I'm really looking forward to this game designer's next project. Yeah, only someone who truly loves players can make such great games. I heard Target Software, the company that published Dark Souls, is working to bring out some of his past classics. I can't wait. I saw some videos on YouTube. Looks like this designer has a new game, a co-op one, and it feels really cheerful. I have to say, now I'm excited for all those heartwarming games too. And the best part, the article hinted at a Dark Souls sequel. Really, that's awesome. Players overseas were full of hype, but players back home had a different attitude. Sure, It Takes Two is really warm and sunny, but I'm still skeptical about what Lucas said. Sounds nice and all, but why does it feel like he's just talking big? +1 love for the players, fine, I'll believe that, but warming people's hearts, let's not take it too seriously. Love Warrior or whatever, doesn't matter, Lucas's games still have to be bought. Don't listen to Lucas talking nonsense. Love Warrior, warming hearts, just laugh it off. The real takeaway from this article is that the Dark Souls sequel is going to be a prequel. Exactly, that's the real point. Yeah, this time the story of Dark Souls might finally be complete. Haha. Can't wait to see the faces of all those lore experts and theory guys. Who's going to be wrong, and who's going to get it right? True, at least the lore community won't be fighting every day anymore. But why do I feel like it won't be that simple? The prequel could still have that fragmented storytelling. Forget the story, the real thing is the difficulty. Didn't Lucas say it's going to be a brand new crazy adventure with even bigger surprises? Or should I say, bigger scares? Scares my foot, after getting beaten so many times before, we're mentally prepared now. I can't wait. NG+8 Ashen1 reporting in. Damn NG+8, I heard that's brutal. I'm only on NG+3, tell us how it feels pro. Not much, really, just wearing Havel's set, and the boss still smacks me around like a little chicken. With this interview article from GameSpace, players' excitement was instantly set ablaze. Some players believed Lucas when he kept talking about warming people's hearts. But many longtime Nebula Games players and Lucas old fans said they wouldn't believe a single word. Still, most players weren't really focused on whether Lucas was truly the so-called warrior of love or not. What caught their attention was the news in the article about the prequel to Dark Souls. During this period, die-hard Dark Souls fans had been constantly longing for news about a sequel. Some even tagged Lucas on his official social media every few days. Whether or not they got a reply didn't matter, they just wanted to make their feelings clear. Now, the news of a new game had finally arrived. As for the difficulty, they were supposed to be scared. Compared to the early days after release, Dark Souls gameplay had already been thoroughly explored, with a flood of high-level players emerging. Videos of things like beating bosses without taking damage or killing them in record time had become common. Online, there were more and more fun videos, like unexpected moments in random modes, meme-filled clips, lore analysis, and even hardcore records of world speedruns and boss speed kills. So most players were feeling very confident. After all, they were no longer those clueless beginners from the early days of kindling the flame. They weren't afraid of the game being too hard, they were afraid it wouldn't be hard enough. When the time came, they would redeem themselves and show what it meant to be an excellent fire keeper. Faced with countless players' enthusiasm, this time Lucas didn't stay silent. He logged into his official account and posted a message with a picture of a bonfire. The post was simple. News about the Dark Souls sequel will be revealed at the Gameplay Expo. The new game's setting will be in the distant Age of Fire, and it will also fill in some story details. But one thing will not change. It will definitely bring players a journey of kindling the flame that they will never forget. With Lucas' post, players were completely hyped. This was as good as official confirmation. Within 10 minutes of the post, the comments section had already gathered thousands of replies. Scrolling through, there were countless "this fire can't be kindled" memes. But deep down, these players were actually very excited. Because one thing's for sure, suffering is addictive. End of the chapter. For players of Dark Souls, the feeling could only be described as it's New Year's again. Some even felt that hearing news about a prequel was more exciting than the new year itself for many die-hard Dark Souls fans. Meanwhile, in the office of Nebula Games, Anna, Rachel, Hector, and the others sitting in the meeting room were all completely confused. Players outside were beyond excited. Major game media were all reporting that a Dark Souls sequel was coming, and fellow designers and developers in the industry were quietly watching. But they themselves knew the truth. this so-called prequel didn't even have a folder created yet. Even the picture Lucas had posted on the official account was something he had quickly pulled from last year's promo materials. And everyone knew today's meeting was basically about this Dark Souls prequel. Lucas, there's only about a month before the Gameplay Expo. Trying to make a demo version isn't very realistic. Before the meeting even started, Hector, sitting next to Lucas, whispered to him. Yeah, even if the overall framework is there, 1 month is just too rushed, right? Rachel added. Everyone shared the same thought. Getting a playable demo ready for the expo would be way too hard. Even if they worked overtime every single day, it didn't feel like they could make it in time. Why are you all panicking? Whether it's interviews or the official account, didn't I already say? During the Gameplay Expo, we'll bring new content to players. Isn't a trailer also considered content? Lucas sighed as he looked at them. When it came to skills, Rachel, Anna and Hector had all been learning and improving a lot over the past 2 years. They were already capable of handling tasks on their own. They could complete the jobs he assigned very well, but when it came to understanding, they were still lacking a bit. As game developers, wasn't this the most basic ability? If a game developer couldn't paint a picture of the future, could they really be called qualified? Look at those famous game studios and producers from before. Which of them wasn't a master at hyping things up? Some official accounts kept posting photos with celebrities that made people wonder if they were spending company money to chase stars, sometimes even throwing in travel or food pictures. And whenever players asked about the progress of a game, the answer was always, "We are working on it." And then there was that one company starting with B, which was even bolder. At the expo, they just showed a game title, then played a grand theme song from the series with some scene images zooming in and out. And that was it. Compared to that, at least Lucas was preparing a proper promo CG. After hearing Lucas's words, everyone went quiet for a while, but then relaxed. Because when you looked at it that way, the time really didn't seem so tight. Last year at this time, they were making the promo CG while also developing Legends of the Three Kingdoms and Fall Guys at the same time. This year, even though the time was about a month shorter, they only needed to focus on one project. On top of that, Dark Souls already had a framework in place, which would save a lot of time for development going forward. Checking the time, Lucas saw that all the staff from different departments had arrived, so he stood up to start today's meeting. All right, I believe everyone already knows the topic of today's meeting. Lucas spoke as he opened the laptop on the meeting table. The projector behind him lit up, showing a document with the title, Dark Souls Prequel. Underneath was a subtitle, Age of Fire. The people in the meeting didn't look too surprised, because Lucas had already hinted on the official account that this prequel game would be set in the ancient era, the very beginning of the Age of Fire. So this subtitle also matches well with the game's story. The only thing everyone is curious about is what makes this prequel game different from the past ones. The prequel to Dark Souls won't change much in the battle system, except for some adjustments to the numbers. Lucas looked at everyone and set the foundation first. Lucas didn't plan to change the core battle system. After all, in the previous life, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 shared the same style of combat system, since both were directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki. It was only because of technical limitations that some difficulties appeared in the details. The clearest example is when drinking Estus in the game. In Dark Souls 3, players can move a little while drinking, which makes the combat feel smoother. But in Dark Souls 1, drinking was a fixed action where you just stood still. This was more like a technical shortcoming. After all, when Miyazaki first developed Dark Souls 1, there was barely any funding. Even the artistic map design wasn't planned from the start, but was instead a compromise due to low budget, yet it unexpectedly became the most iconic part of the game. Of course, drinking in Dark Souls 1 wasn't the most frustrating. The most frustrating was Dark Souls 2, a game many fans considered no longer worthy of the Souls name. That game added an agility stat, and early on, drinking Estus was unbearably slow. Especially for characters starting with nothing, the drinking speed made countless players complain that it felt like they weren't drinking Estus but some bottle of urea. It was that hard to swallow. Still, Dark Souls 2 wasn't without merits. Aside from its map design, its combat system leaned more toward realism, but that style was completely different from Dark Souls 1, which caused a split among players. Some thought it was an evolution, while others felt it was a huge step backward. For a series, changing its core style so directly was risky. So when it came to the battle system, Lucas didn't plan on big changes, only some small adjustments. As for bosses and monsters, Lucas skipped over that part for now. At this stage, there was no need to discuss it yet. Right now, Lucas mainly explained how the map design would work with the game mechanics, so everyone could see what made this game different. The biggest difference from the earlier games is that we're redoing a huge portion of the map. The interconnected design will be shown even more fully in the prequel, and it will become one of the core experiences for players. To let them feel its charm more deeply, there will be some small changes to the mechanics. Lucas smiled at the group. Small changes to the mechanics. Hearing this, Rachel, Anna, and the others all looked curious. But seeing Lucas's faint smile, they had a feeling those small changes might not be so small after all. Sure enough, his next words left them stunned. For example, bonfires in the game can't be used to teleport. Lucas chuckled at their curious expressions. While bonfires can't teleport, Hector's eyes widened. Anna, Rachel, and the rest of the team in the meeting room all looked shocked. Did they hear that right? Bonfires in the game's map can't teleport. If there's one thing that gave players peace of mind in Dark Souls, it was the bonfire. Because at the bonfire, you could return to Firelink Shrine and meet the Firekeeper, and it basically served as saving your progress. But now the bonfire couldn't teleport. How could anyone play this game? If you wanted to see the Firekeeper again, you'd have to climb mountains, cross obstacles, and fight your way back. And if you were carrying tens of thousands of souls and wanted to head back to level up, but then died twice in a row on the way, wouldn't that drive anyone insane? End of the chapter. Seeing everyone's hesitant expressions, Lucas could more or less guess what they were thinking, so he smiled and explained. Relax, it's not what you think. In the game, bonfires aren't completely unable to teleport. As the story moves forward, once players pass through Undead Town, Blight Village, and other areas and successfully ring the bell, they can head to the Royal City and obtain an item called the King's Vessel. That's when teleportation unlocks. Also in the game, players can directly level up at bonfires. Hearing Lucas's words, everyone suddenly understood. So the Firekeeper's role was put onto the bonfire, and the teleport function was tied to a game item. Hector quickly figured out how the bonfire was designed. Exactly, Lucas nodded. It was also done so players could really feel the clever design of the game's map. So teleportation still existed, it was just tied to an item. And this major design choice mainly showed how carefully crafted the game's maps were. With all the interconnected areas, elevators, and shortcuts, players could move from one region to another in a very short time. If we're talking about the peak of map design in the Souls series, without a doubt, it's the map design of Dark Souls 1. But if you just added teleportation to every location in the game, the brilliance of that map design would be greatly reduced. After finishing his talk on the prologue subtitled Age of Fire, Lucas asked Rachel, Anna, the art team, and Hector's level design team to stay. Next, he still needed to carefully go over the game's maps and all kinds of level design details. Compared to the previous Souls game, the prologue needed much more detailed work. A simple trap design shouldn't be shallow. We already had some experience when developing Dark Souls, for example, putting two enemies in front of a blind corner. Normally, when players step into this spot, it becomes a blind angle, and if they're careless, they might get ambushed. This kind of corner trap has been used before, and it's a basic entry-level trick. But in the prologue, we can't be that low level. We need to bring players brand new surprises. That means flipping the thinking around, not hiding it, but making it obvious. We want players to spot the trap that's right in front of them, but the real trap is hidden behind it, like layers of a cake. The outside layer is made for them to find, but in the treetops or corners, there's another enemy. That's the true setup. And there's another advantage to this. It makes players think, I only died because I was careless. So when players die, they'll become more cautious. With subtle getting through design, they'll slowly be drawn into deeper and deeper traps, keeping the sense of challenge alive and giving them a real sense of achievement. Lucas sat at the computer and roughly built a sample scene so everyone could understand what he meant. Hector and the others swallowed hard. With bonfires not allowing teleportation, plus these kinds of traps and levels, this was just cruel. Just imagining it in their heads, and recalling how players had suffered in the Dark Souls world before, they could already feel the deep malice in it. So it's basically like boiling a frog in warm water, while giving players the feeling of being tricked and still thanking you for it. Anna nodded thoughtfully. Lucas didn't reply, he just gave her a look. Did she have to phrase it that harshly? Though it was pretty accurate. The main goal is to give players more gameplay, that way they can really feel surprised. And what is gameplay, anyway? Dark Souls is all about surprising level design, tense boss fights, and deadly traps everywhere, right? If you take away these things, wouldn't that be letting the players down? All of this is to make sure players can enjoy the fun of the game. Everything is for the players, and it's not just empty words, he actually put it into action. That's the kind of spirit a real game creator should have. Hearing Lucas's words, Hector pressed his lips together and stayed quiet. Surprising, yeah, it really was. But happy, well, let's just say players, good luck to you. All we can do is feel sorry for you in advance. After all, with a game like this, just imagining what it'll be like when it's finished already makes Hector a little scared. When the meeting ended, the prequel of Dark Souls had officially entered development. For now, most of the work was still on art production. Since in this game, the action animations weren't changing much. But the maps for the whole game basically had to be completely replaced. Even the Royal City, Farron's sewage pit, and the Royal Garden couldn't reuse the old assets. After all, in terms of timeline, one is the end of the Age of Fire, and the other is just after the first fire was lit. It needed to show the feeling of great changes over time, so players could sense the passing of ages. Besides that, the main work now was the promo CG for Dark Souls, Age of Fire. Lucas had already given the storyboard script to Anna and Rachel. All that was left was the CG production. The work was still handled by the same studio that made the opening cinematic for Dark Souls. Their past collaboration had been very smooth, and their quality was top tier in the industry. As for Dark Souls, Age of Fire, there wasn't much Lucas needed to personally oversee for now. Also, this year's gameplay showcase would be handled by Ethan. Unlike last year, Lucas didn't plan to prepare a brand new game this time. After all, they had just finished developing a big project, It Takes Two, and now had already started the new Dark Souls project. Time was really tight. So this year's gameplay showcase, Lucas decided not to get involved. As for overseas, Target Software had reached out to Lucas, planning to try a worldwide simultaneous release. Lucas agreed with their suggestion. After all, Dark Souls' performance overseas last year was very impressive, and it gave the IP a certain level of recognition. After summing up Nebula Games' current situation, Lucas leaned back on the sofa in his office and stretched. But just then, the phone on the desk rang. Lucas picked it up and his face showed surprise. It was actually a call from Game Division's landline. Why would Game Division be calling him? Lucas, full of confusion, answered the phone. End of the chapter. After picking up the call, what surprised Lucas even more was that the person calling him was the head of the Magic City Game Division, someone he had met a few times before. Minister David, what's the matter? Lucas asked curiously, getting straight to the point. Yes, it's actually something pretty important. Did you see the news earlier? The overseas company Micro Valley Tech announced that their new generation VR game pod has made a big breakthrough. It can give players a more immersive experience, David said over the phone. I saw it, Lucas replied. Lisa had been collecting industry news every day, so Lucas had already seen that report. But back then, Lucas hadn't paid much attention to it. The reason was simple. Based on the information available, this immersive mode required players to be fully absorbed in the game, with their attention highly focused. This meant players had to process a huge amount of information, which made VR games far more draining than regular PC games. As for that kind of subconscious dive tech, like in SAO from his past life, where players enter deep sleep in a mental network, that kind of black technology clearly didn't exist in this world yet. And the price of VR game pods, while cheaper than when they first came out, was still far beyond what most players could afford. Mainstream VR pods cost around $7,000, much more expensive than a PC that could smoothly run top games. As for higher-end VR devices, those were even further out of reach. That's why most players still went to VR experience shops, which were basically like internet cafes, to play. All these factors meant that VR's market share still hadn't surpassed PC. Then there was the cost of game development. Making VR games generally cost more than PC games. Aside from the top companies that released dedicated VR titles every year, second-tier studios usually tested the waters on PC first, and only after doing well there would they consider porting their games to VR. That was why Lucas had Nebula Games mainly focus on the PC platform for now. As for our country, our new generation VR game pod has already reached a testing stage, David said. But we don't have enough games to test with, and because this new generation pod gives players an even stronger sense of immersion, we also need to run a lot of safety tests. Some games may seem fine on PC, but once in VR with full immersion, they could create unusual and intense effects for players. Of course, it's hard to explain everything over the phone. Log in to the Game Division's official site and check the letter we sent. If you're interested, you can come by Game Division tomorrow afternoon, David added. Although Lucas didn't know the full details yet, after hearing David's words, he already had a good idea. Clearly, this was about competition in cutting-edge platform technology. For Game Division, VR hardware clearly carried special weight. It was like how consoles had worked in his previous life. Back then, Nintendo rose up after the Atari crash and dominated the market for a time. Everyone in the industry had to follow Nintendo's rules, and the licensing system was born out of that era. After hanging up, Lucas logged into the Game Division's official site. After going through the contents, he basically understood the situation. It was just as he had thought. The next day, in the Game Division building's conference hall, Lucas was a bit surprised, since quite a lot of designers had shown up. Skynova, NetDragon, and many other well-known domestic game companies all had people attending. Among them, Lucas also spotted some familiar faces, like the good-natured Mr. Marcus. "Mr. Marcus, you came too," Lucas went over to greet him. Marcus, who had been chatting casually with someone else, heard the voice and turned to see Lucas walking toward him with a big smile. For a moment, the memory of that night, when Lucas held someone else's trophy, flashed in his mind. He showed a slightly awkward but still polite smile. "Lucas, you're here too." But Lucas didn't get much time to catch up. On stage in the meeting room, David from Game Division had already stepped up. "All of you here are top names in the game industry. The reason we gathered you today is actually pretty simple. The next generation VR gaming equipment has already reached the testing stage. At the same time, we've made special adjustments to the development kit's game engine for this new VR device, opening up a new physics engine framework." As David spoke, the designers, including Lucas, all basically understood why Game Division had called them together. In short, the VR device and engine had made new progress. It wasn't ready for the market yet, but overseas teams were at about the same stage, and they'd already started promoting it. Naturally, the domestic side couldn't afford to fall behind, but the problem was that they lacked the right game content to use for testing. Of course, they didn't mean full games, just demo-like experiences, and it wasn't without benefits. First, Game Division was offering dedicated funding. The intellectual property created would still belong to the designers and companies. In simple terms, Game Division was paying them to make something, and the subsidies were not small. Of course, quality had to pass the bar, and Game Division would keep track of the progress in real time. And honestly, no one invited here was some rookie. They were all at least mid-tier in the industry, so no one would be dumb enough to waste the chance just to cheat subsidies. Another perk was that those who joined the testing would be the first to get access to the new technology. It wouldn't be rolled out to every designer for free right away. Those who didn't join, well, just like before, they'd have to pay extra for the extra resources or access. After David's short introduction, the group of designers followed Game Division's staff and got into cars heading toward the company's research park. Led by staff, they personally got to try out the new system. Soon it was Lucas's turn. After stepping into the VR pod, the scene he saw was a bare, unfinished room environment. At the same time, Lucas understood what David had meant earlier. He had tried the VR pods in the parallel world before. The sense of immersion was strong, sure. But there were still flaws. The new VR pod, however, gave an almost perfect response. Wearing a full-body feedback suit and gloves, lying inside the pod, every move he made gave an incredibly realistic reaction. Walking, jumping, punching, Lucas tried a few moves. The feeling was still a little different from real life, but the feedback was now almost indistinguishable from reality. The level of immersion this VR device gives, it's already reached this point, Lucas exclaimed as he climbed out of the pod. But he also understood the issues ahead. The most obvious one was that an overly strong sense of immersion could bring negative side effects. Using Dark Souls as an example, if it were made into a VR game with the level of immersion Lucas just experienced, most players probably couldn't handle it, not because of the difficulty, but because the immersion would scare them off. Just think about the sewer rats, the creepy underground prison scenes, not to mention horror games. After all the designers on site had tried it, David also explained a few things. In short, if any designer here is interested, they can create a demo game for the game division to test. Based on the feedback, adjustments will be made to the immersion level in the game pod. Because the immersion is so strong, some parts may need to be toned down. It sounds a bit funny and contradictory, but after experiencing it himself, Lucas understood what that meant. Next came the sign-up session. Aside from a few designers who were busy with their own projects, there were 13 senior designers who stayed, including Lucas. Marcus was there too. "Lucas, are you planning to join the game division's demo project?" Marcus asked curiously as they stood in line together. After all, rumors about the Dark Souls sequel were all over the internet. Shouldn't Lucas be fully focused on developing Dark Souls right now? How does he have time to take on the game division's task? Could it be that the development of Dark Souls is so far ahead that Lucas doesn't need to oversee it anymore? Thinking about it, that didn't seem impossible. After all, it's just a sequel. In the gaming industry, it's almost an unspoken rule that sequels can reuse a lot of art assets, which saves a lot of development time. Completely unaware that Marcus was overthinking things, Lucas smiled. "I'm just curious. Plus, this will be my first time making a VR game, and I have a few interesting ideas." That was true. Given this chance, Lucas really wanted to try. Hearing this, Marcus's eyes lit up. Actually, designing a VR game isn't that different from a PC game. The biggest differences are the controls and the sense of perspective. Most VR games use first-person view, but in some cases, third-person works better, like in action games focused on visuals. "Then Marcus, let's share ideas later," Lucas said, looking at the enthusiastic Marcus. He couldn't help but think, Marcus is really a nice guy. Of course, Marcus grinned. After losing in the first contest, getting overshadowed in the second gameplay showcase, and winning nothing at the Game of the Year awards, this was his chance to shine again. Since Lucas asked him, this time he would really play the role of a teacher. "Oh, by the way, Lucas, do you have any ideas for the new game?" Marcus suddenly asked. "I do have one, the name for the PT game," Lucas said with a smile and a nod. "PT, what does that mean? Sounds kind of strange," Marcus asked curiously. "It's short for playable teaser. After all, this demo is basically a playable preview. We could even add a prefix and call it Silent Hill PT," Lucas said with a grin. "Silent Hill PT, huh? That sounds pretty meaningful. Let's talk more about it later, Lucas," Marcus said with a smile. "Definitely," Lucas replied with a nod. End of the chapter. While Marcus was chatting with Lucas, the other game designers were also discussing what kind of demo they should work on. "I think making an extreme sports game would be great. On one hand, it can test the new engine and how it interacts with the VR environment. On the other hand, an immersive extreme sports experience could give us really good feedback data." "That sounds promising. We could even expand it into an action-adventure game. For example, climbing a high mountain and adding a falling experience, or facing wild beasts in the forest for an intense immersion effect." "What do you guys think about a horror game? Something like Lucas's Outlast. If we want to test the threshold of immersion, isn't horror the best choice?" "It's definitely a good idea, but Outlast is way too gory. On PC it's fine, but in VR, with that amount of blood and gore, there's no way it would pass approval." You're right, but without all the blood, the horror level of Outlast would drop by several notches. The designers who knew each other kept discussing their ideas. Everyone had different opinions on what type of game would be best for testing. Still, some designers ended up thinking along the same lines as Lucas: start with horror games. After all, horror is what can shake the player's emotions the most. That's exactly why Lucas chose Silent Hill PT for this test. The theme was perfect, and also because in his previous life, this game only had a single demo. But even though it was just a demo, it scared the hell out of countless players. Especially the looping hallway that created endless fear. Many later horror games copied this idea. Unlike Outlast, which was full of gore, Silent Hill PT barely had any visual horror. Apart from the deformed baby in the sink and the lovely wife Lisa, there was nothing else visually terrifying. Silent Hill PT is the purest kind of horror, not about what you see, but about the unknown. You never know what will pop out or from where, which makes players doubt themselves. It's like when you watch a horror movie alone at midnight, and suddenly the lights go out, and the wind starts blowing outside. You're the only one at home, but you feel like there's someone under your window, in your closet, or right outside your door. This kind of fear from self-suggestion is the core of the Silent Hill series, and Silent Hill PT takes it to the extreme. The narrow hallway, the endless loops, the music and sound effects, and the subtle changes in the same scene over time. Silent Hill PT reached the peak of fear building. As for whether making this game could scare someone so badly it affects their health, Lucas had already done his research and talked with the game division staff about it, so he had a good idea of what to expect. First of all, it's scary. It's definitely going to scare people. If a horror game can't scare anyone, can you even call it a horror game? As for scaring someone to death, that's completely impossible. This isn't a game aimed at the general public. It's a demo provided for testing a new type of VR device. The people chosen for testing are basically carefully selected. And during testing, the body's functions are fully monitored, not just by the VR device, but also by backup monitoring equipment. There are also medical staff standing by to make sure the tester's safety is guaranteed. If the tester's body or emotions show strong fluctuations, the VR system will immediately stop the game. Then, based on the tester's feedback, records are made, and the experience is analyzed to provide data for the research team working on VR game pods. So safety is completely guaranteed. As for the so-called scared to death, it doesn't literally mean dying from fear. It refers to other symptoms triggered by emotional stress. The human brain has an area called the amygdala, which controls fear. Fear is actually a form of self-protection. But when humans feel fear and can't determine whether it will harm them, the amygdala's feedback mechanism kicks in. This causes a surge of adrenaline, speeding up the heartbeat, raising blood pressure, constricting blood vessels, and increasing blood sugar. If this state lasts too long, it can overload the body and damage heart tissue. For a healthy person with a strong heart, if they actually die while playing a horror game, there's only one possible reason. During the game, they already felt severe discomfort but kept playing anyway, acting like nothing was wrong, and continued to endure extreme scares. In the end, the body overloaded and failed. So when it comes to whether Silent Hill PT might have negative effects, Lucas had no more worries. He could just go all out and create without holding back. After registering the related details at Game Division, Lucas and Marcus chatted a bit before heading back to Nebula Games. The VR development prototype for Silent Hill PT will be delivered later by someone from Game Division. As for subsidies, at first Nebula Games will pay out of pocket. Later, after sending invoices to Game Division and getting approval, the subsidy will be transferred to the company account. Back at the office, Lucas started writing the design concept draft for Silent Hill PT. After all, it's just a demo, and the story revealed in the demo isn't very complicated. As for some of the Easter eggs in the game, Lucas decided not to change them. The original Silent Hill PT had 2 special Easter eggs. For example, after clearing the game, there would be a male voice monologue, hinting at the irreconcilable conflict between the creator Hideo Kojima and his old company Konami. And the mysterious number 204,863 mentioned in the game just like in Kojima's previous work Metal Gear Solid V. The phantom pain hinted at the game's setting. As for these 2 Easter eggs, players in this parallel world might not understand them at all. But they could still leave a hidden detail. Even though this VR demo won't be for the public, Game Division will probably make some promotional videos later. At that time, players will be able to see parts of the demo. When the time comes to bring the Silent Hill series to players in the future, these Easter eggs will give them a completely different feeling when they look back. Thinking of this, Lucas couldn't help but smile. As a game designer, this is how you always care about the player's experience. That's what makes a true designer with heart. Lucas let out a sigh and went back to drafting the design concept. There wasn't much content, and by the afternoon, Lucas had already finished most of it. At the same time, Game Division was working quickly too, and they had already sent over the VR prototype. They also temporarily unlocked higher-level permissions for the game designers. Walking out of the office and into the project room, Lucas saw Anna, Rachel, and Hector all busy working on Dark Souls, Age of Fire. Well, working on the promo trailer. Art team, pause for now. Rachel, pull a small group, we'll need to work on a VR demo next, Lucas said as he entered the studio. Everyone looked shocked when they heard him. Rachel's eyes went wide. VR, we're making a VR game now. Is it a new IP or an old one? Don't tell me it's a VR version of It Takes Two. Not just Rachel, Anna, Hector, and the others were just as confused. Weren't they supposed to be focusing on the Dark Souls, Age of Fire trailer right now? Why suddenly shift to VR? Was this related to Lucas's trip to Game Division? Many people secretly started guessing. None of that, it's just a test demo, nothing too big, won't need many people either. We'll outsource the modeling, so the main job will be handling VR shots and atmosphere, Lucas explained with a smile. Lucas, I'll do it, Rachel jumped in right away. Her workload on Dark Souls, Age of Fire wasn't too heavy, and more importantly, she was genuinely interested. This was her first time working on anything VR. Even if the tasks weren't that different from before, the game's nature was completely new. Even if Lucas said it was just a demo. At that moment, Rachel felt the same excitement as when she first started making games. All right then, Rachel and 2 more from the art team. I'll explain the features of this VR game. Lucas looked at Rachel, who was practically glowing with excitement. He hesitated a bit, then picked 2 more people. Both of them looked pleased. As they followed Lucas to the meeting room, Rachel was still smiling, wondering what kind of VR demo they were going to make. Would it be warm and wholesome like It Takes Two, epic like Dark Souls, or light and cute like Fall Guys? End of the chapter, everyone was excited. A VR game wasn't much on its own, but this was the first VR project within Nebula Games. Lucas had said it was just a demo, probably made because of a request from Game Division. But no matter what, it was still a VR game. Being part of the company's first VR project was a huge achievement, and something worth remembering. The 2 art team members looked thrilled. Rachel was happy too, simply because it was her first time joining a VR project. Lucas, what kind of demo are we making this time? Rachel asked in the meeting room, still full of excitement. The 2 other art members also looked at Lucas expectantly. A story about family. Lucas thought for a moment and gave what he felt was the best description. Family? Could it be like It Takes Two? The moment she heard the word family, Rachel pictured 2 little dolls, one made of wood, the other of clay. But then she saw the title on the big screen, the keywords underneath, and a simple concept sketch of Lisa. Rachel went silent. So much for wholesome. On the screen were the words Silent Hill PT, and beneath it, Lisa. Missing one eye, the other rolled back, her face bloody with a mouthful of yellow teeth. Rachel and the 2 art team members, who had been so excited, froze in silence. As you can see, this will be a horror-themed demo. Lisa will be the main monster, and in a way, the female-led. Lucas smiled at their stunned faces. Just from the concept art alone, the impact was huge, even before being made into VR. The design was just too terrifying. But that was normal, it was a horror game. If it wasn't scary, how could it frighten players? Imagine if the monster in a horror game turned out to be a tall, seductive beauty instead. How would that be horror? Players would already be waiting eagerly to meet those so-called scary ghosts. As long as they had the guts, they'd be hopping the ghost could even go on maternity leave. Lucas, this is our new game. Rachel's voice shook a little as she looked at Lucas. The gap between reality and what she had imagined was just too big. Don't worry, it's not that scary. In the game, aside from Lisa, the only disturbing thing is a fetus. Oh, unless you're afraid of cockroaches, then you'll have to add that too. Lucas smiled as he said this. Hearing Lucas' words, Rachel was speechless. Seriously, she believed him. But this time, Lucas really wasn't lying. That was also what made the Silent Hill PT demo so special. In the past, many players, including people in the game industry, called this demo a near-perfect work. And in fact, it really was. Nobody knew what the full version of the game would have been like, and there was no need to hype it up too much. After all, even Konami and Hideo Kojima probably had no clear idea what the complete version would be, since it was cancelled halfway. But as a demo, it could only be described with one phrase: flawless. It achieved everything a demo should, and did it perfectly. The endless hallway gave a strong sense of space, pushing the player forward with the story, while using darkness and repetition to overwhelm the player visually. Even though the whole game was just one long corridor from beginning to end, it gave players a crushing sense of pressure. And then there was the use of color. Whether in horror movies or horror games, color is always a key element. This demo used a very unique style, a pale warm color tone. In fact, more than 80% of the scenes in PT were built with warm colors, except for the dim room at the start where the cockroach crawls. The whole demo was filled with yellows, browns, reds, and dark greens, but the light sources leaned toward a colder palette, using bluish-white incandescent lamps. The worst part was that the lights were dazzling bright, yet only lit up a few meters around them. This strong contrast gave off a sense of cold violence and loneliness. Feelings that couldn't be released, explained, or expressed all mixed together, raising the horror atmosphere to another level. As Lucas explained the game's design choices and the symbolism in the art, Rachel and the others felt a chill run through them. Lucas, this will scare players to death, Rachel couldn't help but complain. Relax, the VR version isn't meant for players to casually try. Professionals will test it. And besides, we'll adapt it to fit VR hardware and work with the Game Division Research Lab for double safety, Lucas explained. After Lucas finished explaining the PT design draft, Rachel and the two other members of the art team started their work. Just as Lucas said, the workload wasn't heavy at all. The game was set in a fixed scene, with changes only in atmosphere, lighting, and small details like photos, glass, and objects. Meanwhile, Lucas focused on researching the new VR hardware and the game engine. He had already tried the new VR tech at the research center before. Of course, it wasn't anything like subconscious implantation, sci-fi tech. Players still had to stay focused while wearing motion capture suits, gloves, and similar gear. Inside the VR pod, different sensors collected movement data. On one hand, this was for safety, cutting the connection if the player's condition fluctuated. On the other hand, it made the game feel more real. For example, if a player tried to run, even slight movements of their feet would trigger matching feedback in-game. But whether a VR game supported certain actions still depended on its design. If the game didn't include running, then no matter how much you kicked inside the pod, the game wouldn't respond. It might sound strange, but after playing for a while, people got used to it. Just like how a mouse and keyboard gamer feels awkward the first time they try a controller. But after enough time, it feels normal. That was also why VR games were so mentally draining for players. And why most VR games cost so much to make. The designers had to pack in tons of tiny details. The more detail, the deeper the immersion, and details meant money. After understanding the main differences between VR games and PC games, Lucas started designing the finer parts of Silent Hill PT. As for the motion capture, Nebula Games didn't need to handle it. Since the game division covered part of the cost, they just outsourced all of it. That way, they could finish the demo as fast as possible. And honestly, it wasn't that big of a project anyway. End of the chapter. The development of Silent Hill PT was going smoothly, even though it was their first VR project. But since Silent Hill PT wasn't a full game, just a demo, it wasn't too large in scale. The gameplay was basically puzzle solving, with no combat system. Even the original demo didn't have much in the way of actions, just opening doors, picking up items, and basic interactions. For this VR project, Lucas added some small details to make the experience feel more immersive. Of course, things like jumping, running, and climbing still weren't included, since they would affect the demo too much. Besides that, the game itself was already in first person, so Lucas didn't need to worry too much about how it would look in VR. But compared to most first-person PC games, which usually stick to a default 90-degree field of view, moving to VR meant it needed a much wider view. Even though it was still first-person, the way it felt in VR was very different from PC games. In many PC first-person games, it often feels like your eyes are stuck in your chest, because certain actions in third-person and first-person are completely different. What looks like a normal move in first-person can look really strange in third-person. And the other way around too. That's why some games let players switch between first-person and third-person, but to keep the character from moving in weird ways, developers usually have to prepare two different animation sets, one for each view. But that also means higher costs. On the VR side though, the limited field of view design actually made this problem easier to handle. This scene where Lisa just shows up, it's too bright. The player should be able to see her outline. But not her face. It needs that feeling of mystery, like something half hidden, so when the player suddenly realizes Lisa is rushing at them, their heart races like crazy, like a deer crashing around inside their chest. In the project room, Lucas was pointing out changes to the lighting and colors while Rachel adjusted the scene. Hearing his words, Rachel hesitated. This wasn't a deer crashing around in the heart, it was more like a raging elephant barging in. Next to them, Hector and the others quietly lowered their heads. The Dark Souls prequel trailer had also been coming along smoothly, and with the Gameplay Expo getting closer, the company had already started preparing for it. The trailer for the Dark Souls prequel was almost done, and Hector's team had already begun building the showcase area. At the same time, they had also gotten a look at Lucas's so-called VR demo. But the more they learned, the more their hearts felt uneasy. Since Silent Hill PT was made as a demo for the new VR tests, the VR prototype from Game Division was locked down and couldn't actually be played directly. Not that Hector and the others wanted to try it, just watching was already enough to make them shiver. And the key point was that this demo was only about 30 minutes long. Yet the puzzles in it could only be described as terrifying. It even used tricks like Undertale's fake crash mechanic. Clues for solving the game were hidden in collectible photo fragments and in error text that appeared during the fake crashes. If players couldn't pick up on these things, they would be stuck wandering forever in that creepy, endless hallway. With that level of horror, Hector and the others suddenly felt that the Dark Souls prequel actually seemed bright and cheerful in comparison. Soon, the days passed, and the Gameplay Expo was just around the corner. The company had already begun preparing for it. Though honestly, there wasn't much to prepare. Like last year, except this time they added 2 special theme zones. One for It Takes Two and one for Dark Souls. And unlike last year, where they saved the trailer reveal for the final day, this year they didn't bother keeping it a secret. After all, there was only one trailer. They decided to show it right on the first day and let players enjoy it without delay. Once it was out, players could just go about doing whatever they wanted, since the big reveal was already done. Meanwhile, as the company was making preparations, Lucas brought the finished Silent Hill PT over to Game Division to hand it in. Less than 20 days, and you're already done. Hearing Lucas's report, David, the division head, looked shocked. It's mainly because Silent Hill PT isn't that big of a demo, Lucas said with a smile as he handed over the files. David glanced over the documents. As head of Game Division, David wasn't clueless. Looking at the subsidy paperwork and project details, he understood right away. Lucas had listed very few project categories, and the whole demo was built around a single scene. Lucas, the subsidy is tied to content size, sure, but the whole point this time is to test how immersive the new VR feels. The budget shouldn't be wasted, but don't save money for Game Division either. David sighed and shook his head. He guessed Lucas was still young, trying too hard to be careful with the funds. "Don't worry, sir, the game may look simple, but it's quite unique. It'll definitely work well for testing," Lucas said with a grin. "All right then, if the results aren't good enough, just rework it. But next time, don't hold back on the budget. I'll have Zuck go with you to the park. A lot of other designers are already there checking out the specs, so your demo can also serve as a showcase. You should all share your experiences with developing for the new VR. After all, it's not just the players' feedback that matters. Your experience as developers is just as important," David said to Lucas. After leaving the game division building, Lucas drove and followed Zuck to the research park. Many designers were listening to an explanation about the different parameters of the VR equipment there. Among them were some new faces, clearly senior designers who had joined game division later. There were also familiar ones, like the warm-hearted Marcus. "Lucas, you finished your demo already." After hearing Lucas explain his reason for coming, Marcus, just like David before, was stunned. He had talked with Lucas a few times recently too. But since he was busy with his own design work, he only knew Lucas's demo was horror-themed and nothing else. Today, he mainly came to get a better understanding of the VR equipment's parameters, so he could adjust his content accordingly. But now Lucas suddenly showed up and told him the demo was done. "It's mainly because the game is a bit special, and it's not that big in size." Lucas smiled and nodded. The staff at the research park also looked surprised. Clearly, none of them expected to already have test material ready. While Lucas was chatting, the staff informed them that all the test preparations were already complete. "It's a pity that only testers who pass the physical check and review can try it. Otherwise, I'd really like to experience your game myself, Lucas," Marcus said with some regret. Some designers nearby, whether Lucas knew them or not, were also talking. It was clear they were looking forward to Lucas's upcoming demo. After all, this was the first officially playable demo on the new VR system. Plus, Lucas's works over the past 2 years had all been very unique. They felt this new game, Silent Hill PT, might give them some real inspiration. The only regret was that they couldn't play it themselves. Otherwise, they could better feel the intentions behind the design. "Well, Marcus, I think you might change your mind later," Lucas chuckled. Hearing Lucas's words, the designers nearby didn't say anything, only smiled. After all, everyone was in the same field, so they needed to give each other some face. Horror theme, that's not such a big deal. As game designers, what haven't they seen before? It's just a horror game. It's not like they hadn't played Lucas's Outlast before. The testers about to try it had the same thought. Only one device was prepared, but 3 testers were on duty that day. They used rock, paper, scissors to decide who would go first. "Thanks, I'll take the first shot at this experience." A tall young man, about 1.85 meters, grinned at his 2 disappointed co-workers. His badge on his chest showed his name, Jury. The other 2 were Felix and Quinn, both looking sturdy, since testers for these experiences were carefully selected. "Too bad, I've always liked Lucas's games," Felix said with regret. "Yeah, but don't wet yourself later," Quinn teased. Haven't we already tested all kinds of materials on the new VR device? We've seen plenty of bloody and scary stuff. You think I'd be afraid?" Jury laughed. While the 3 of them were talking, Lucas and the others went into a room. In front of them was a large LCD screen. According to the staff, it would display the testers' gameplay later. Soon after the staff checked and confirmed everything was fine, Jury entered the game pod with excitement. As a young man, Jury naturally liked games, and he was no stranger to Lucas. Now that he had the chance to try the very first demo made for the new VR device, he was both thrilled and excited. Carrying that excitement and expectation, he officially started the test demo called Silent Hill PT inside the game pod. End of the chapter. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.